Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. Well, I felt like I haven't done any good ink blending in a little minute, so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do some masking. We're going to create I want to say night scene was what I was going for, but it really morphed into something different, I will say. I'm going to use some watercolor paper for this. If you are one who struggles with ink blending, I highly recommend watercolor paper. This is the Holtz watercolor paper. It has a coating on it which makes that ink just glide smoothly. Even if you put a big old blob on there, you can come back in and blend it out, unlike other papers that kind of soak it up too fast for you to be able to move it, and you end up with big splotches. I'm going to use some masking paper. This happens to be the Masking Magic Sheets from Gina. And then I'm also going to use some Hero Arts Infinity dies. These are an absolute staple, and I have cut a moon. This is going to be a moon for me, and I'm going to do a couple of colors together. I am keeping this so insanely simple. I'm doing purple and green, but here's the trick. We don't want to blend them together because they are going to make mud. So how do we pop those on the same sheet of cardstock? Now I'm going to cut this down because I want this to be a slimmer strip that goes down the middle of my card. Not that slim, because it's going to be about 3 inches or so wide, and I don't really have a measurement for this. I tend to just, do a cut, and then I hold it up against my card and think, is that about right? Is there a bit off the edges? Do I need to do a bit more? Have I done too much? If I've done too much, then I need to readjust my expectations. And if I haven't done enough, then I just whip it back into the trimmer and trim a little bit more. Right, I do have a scrap piece of paper down. I have my mask ready to go. This has little release paper that you can peel off the back. Don't forget that you can reuse this mask, so don't throw away the release pieces. You just pop that beside you, and then you can reuse the mask. These have a plasticky kind of coating on it with the Gina masks, and so this means that they really do hold up to very good saturation. Now I'm going to use a couple of different greens here, but really just one ink blending tool. I just use the same tool for like one ink blender for each color family, so this had previous green on it as well. I'm using some peeled paint for the lighter color, and I'm just sort of doing this little rounded sort of look there down the bottom. I have some Rustic Wilderness, that is the darker color, and then I want to somewhat blend in between these. Really go in with a light hand, but you don't have to have perfect blending, and this is basically what I always say, because we are going to find a way to disguise this. It is sort of creating the background. Now I have the purples. This is Shaded Lilac. Clearly I was using seedless preserves before this for a different project, because this is not true shaded lilac color and that doesn't bother me. That's okay. I'm more than happy with that. It is what it is. It's a light purple is what it is. Now coming in around the moon here, which you're going to be able to see, I'm coming in just so light-handed. I'm also coming in really light-handed when it comes to where the purple is going to meet the green, because as I said, we don't want those two colors to have a nice thorough mix together, and we're going to disguise that later on, of course. We just want to touch the colors just, we don't want to come in too heavy. This is Seedless Preserves, and I'm coming in pretty heavy with this layer. Like I am tapping this ink on rather than even blending it. Then I want to empty my brush a little bit of ink, because this is when I want to blend between the two colors. Now if you have two different blending brushes, then this is going to make it a bit easier, but I don't have the space or finances to just have one for every single color. So I tend to just, wipe off a bit of the ink that's on there and blend in between the two. It works out just fine for my liking. I am coming in with a little bit of black soot. Now I did think that I would end up blending this all around, but actually I just put it in the bottom, and I was pretty happy with that. I'm using a little Gina blending brush for this. It came as a freebie in one of my scrapbook.com orders. They always do heaps of freebies, which I absolutely love. Sometimes there is 3 or 4. In fact, most times there are, and you can add all of them. You don't have to just choose one, so that is always fun, and there is always pretty much a discount code as well to get a little bit off for sure. And I post lots of those on my Facebook group as well, so if you would like to see there, or you would like to post your projects, then pop on over to Come Crafting with Natasha. Now, this is the Autumn Silhouettes, and I'm going to stamp this not in black though. Even though you absolutely could, I think that would definitely give it a very nighttime feel. But actually, I decided to just stamp this in the purple color. So I'm going to go with Villainous Potion, which is the darkest purple that I have. Again, I'm using Distress Oxides for this. I have removed the mask. I just took it off 1 second ago. You saw me remove it. So now we are actually going to stamp into the center of that moon. We need to do a bit of work on it to turn it into a moon though, but it looks pretty good as is. I'm stamping with the Distress Oxide, and that's the reason that I'm using my stamping platform, because I don't find that I get the best results stamping with oxides. Not in comparison to, say, for example, some of the dye inks or some of the pigment inks, the VersaFine clear inks that I love, which I would happily, easily use a block for. Now, I had a little space here, and I knew this little tuft of grass is one of my absolute favorites, and this is a gorgeous butterfly set by Gina, and I think it's called Beautiful Butterflies. But this little tuft of grass here is just one of my most used stamps. I absolutely love it. I stamp it just peeking out the corner there. Now, lots of people ask me how I clean my stamps. I use this Nuvo stamp cleaner, and you can see that this one has a bit in it. I've already given it a wipe. But when I spray a spray of that and then I give it a little rub around it, this is going to come up pretty much looking brand new again. You can see it gets rid of all of the ink and all the little crevices that I can't usually get. So I don't do that every time I use them, but just when I notice that it's starting to get, a little bit gunked up with ink. And then this is where we want to add in a couple of extra details, and sometimes it can be just the extra little details that make these cards. I use the gloss white media spray from Dina Wakeley, and I love this because even when you spray it or splatter it on top of Distress Oxides, it doesn't pick up that white color and it stays nice and white, and so that is one of the reasons. There's a few products that do that, but if you were to use some products, then because the oxides are water reactive, then with the liquid going on them, they react and then turn the color of whatever you've put it onto, and so I wanted them to be nice, white and bright, and this is what is going to make that happen. Then I'm taking some Squeeze Lemonade Distress Oxide ink, put a little bit there on my acrylic block, add a little bit of water, and we're going to paint in just some random nothing, just put in a little bit down to create some shadows on the moon, just to make it a little more realistic, a little more plain, give it a little bit more dimension. You could also do a little bit of shading if you wanted to, but we are keeping this super simple today. So just a little bit of very, very light, and I'll hold this up in a second and you'll see it just gives the moon that extra little bit. We have stamped those that little silhouette image over top. Oh, it's a little bit hard to see with the light, but there is some gorgeous yellow there. It's going to dry. You could also use a little bit of grey, very, very light grey. That would work too if you had that. And then I did want to add on a little sentiment, and this is actually going to be for a birthday card. So I'm going to use the Gina K Big Birthdays, and actually I'm going to use one of the smallest stamps that is in here. This just gives you a huge range. I must admit, obviously birthday cards are one of my most popular. It's what I make the most of. And so I'm going to do some white heat embossing because we have a lot of color going on this one. And so I always do a little test. When I have done ink blending and stamping with ink, it saves so many headaches to just pour your embossing powder over your image, with something underneath to catch it, and then just pour it over just to check that it's not sticking, because it is the biggest rolling eyes moment when you pop your embossing powder over something you have stamped and actually you find that all of that ink is still wet. So raise your hand if you have done that, and then raise your hand if you've done it more than 10 times and haven't learnt to test yet because that is me, and I have finally learnt. Then just to add a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of shine, then something to catch the eye, movement in the card, I'm going to add a little bit of matte gold just down the sides here. Now this is the Concord in 9th. I really love the matte gold. I used to use the mirror cardstock, but I've definitely shifted over to this one, and I just pop some double-sided adhesive down each side of my little card front there, and I'm doing this just to give it that tiny little bit. I don't want too much to show through. I still want there to be some space on the sides of the card, and this is one of the reasons why I cut it just that little bit smaller in the very, very beginning. Then I'm going to take some of the foam tape, pop this up because, you know, this is just going to go onto a plain white card base. And then I always say, if you are using foam tape and you're just not sure about your ability to pop these down nice and straight the first time, then add some liquid glue, cover that foam tape. You're still going to get the effect of the foam tape, but you're going to get the ability to move this around. And that's what I love about liquid glue. So it doesn't bother me to pop liquid glue on the back, make sure that I can pop it down, move it around, and actually get it the place that I want it, rather than, you know, again, rolling my eyes that, again, I missed where I wanted it to go. So I hope that you have enjoyed this card today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks, bye!